Our true nature can take many forms, and so this is another way of looking at freedom. It is the freedom to take the form that the moment demands or calls forth. That's a different kind of freedom, isn't it? If we've just gone from identification with form to identification with formlessness, we very well may not have the freedom to just become what the moment calls for. That's a different kind of letting go, because to do that, we can't be holding on to a given perspective or trying to maintain a given perspective, that our orientation to life then just becomes, it becomes what our true nature really is, which is a kind of infinite field of potentiality. That's sort of my definition of emptiness. An infinite field of potentiality. And I think the freedom is being in visceral contact with that potentiality, but also with the way that true nature has almost an infinite variety of faces and ways that it can present itself. And in the modern world, where most serious spiritual, need a better word than seekers. I don't know what it is, but it'd be nice. It'll come up. Maybe one of you will come up with something better than that. I don't know, but you know what I mean. We'll say spiritual seekers for the moment. But since most of us aren't called to be renunciates, we do, I think, need a sense of freedom that's not state-specific. Because if you think about it, if you're sitting there, even if you're in a really nice, expanded, spacious state of being, if there's any part of you that's trying to stay there, the part that's trying to stay there, that's the egocentricity. You see what I mean? That's the part that's trying to stay there. That's the part that's afraid of losing it, right? Imagine that there is, you could be in a very open, expanded, wonderful state of being, but there was nothing that was picking and choosing which state that was going to try to hold on to. There was no holding on at all. Then that would just be the experience of being that you happen to be in at that moment. And perhaps the next moment will call for something completely different. I think that's a different kind of freedom. And I think it's extremely relevant in the modern day. Like I said, when most of us aren't renunciants and we are being called upon in any given day, just one perspective isn't going to do it, is it? Responding from the same place in every situation is like, it's like being a hammer and seeing every situation as a nail. Right? But the situation may not be a nail, and if you're beating it over the head with a hammer, it may not fit very well. So this is one of the wonderful things that I learned in the tradition that I came from in Zen. In Zen, you aren't just not allowed to give descriptions of reality. If I went to my teacher and said, I realize that I'm emptiness, it would be like, get out of here. Try it again next time. Not that they're saying that experience isn't real. It might be real, it might not. But in the traditional Zen, at least in many forms of Zen, what they're more interested in is you being able to express what you realize. Act on it, in other words. Right? Not just describe it, but let it become an action. So you walk in that door and you better have an action that describes what you've realized. Does it make sense? Okay. Maybe not, but that's okay. But it seems like this rarefied thing, you know, there's all these wild like koans, these sort of riddles that you can't solve with your mind. And the first time you ever get through one of them, you know, and you kind of, the solution, you could say, which isn't really a solution like we usually think of a solution. It's more like a resolution. And it's always a kind of aha, and you kind of fall for it, because when you solve the first one, you think, oh, I'm onto it. Right? You almost like you got the sacred perspective, and you're going to use this as the key that unlocks the other 250 koan doors, you know, or whatever there are. And then you find out, well, that's the right key to a number of them, but then not very long you'll get one where that key isn't fitting in that lock. It's just not going to work. And it's weird because you say, but wait, this is so revelatory, and it seems so true, and it seems so real, and why isn't it working, right? Because this koan is sort of then, a different koan is sort of an embodiment of the way the world might need you to come from a different perspective. Do you have the freedom to shift perspective? Or have you just gone from one perspective to another that you're still limited by? Does that make sense? Because you can be limited by freedom if it's kind of the freedom from a given perspective. And if that's all it is, then well, life is like that, isn't it? You have an insight, you have some sort of revelatory moment, and then go home and see how it goes. Right? Does the key fit the lock, right? Right? And just because we have that, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have an understanding of, we know how to experience it when we're experiencing it, but do we know how to really embody it? Do we know how it translates into activity and conversation and disagreement and, well, all that life is? And so I've seen that life is in many ways the greatest of our spiritual teachers. It's sort of a harsh version of a spiritual teacher, right? Because it just keeps plowing along, right? And it's not asking you if you liked it or how it's going for you. It's just the way it is, and that's what makes it such a great teacher, because in essence, life is saying what's called for here is a freedom from rigid positionality. A flexibility of spirit. And in that, we can't even have attachment to our own realization, because if we have attachment to our realization, we'll have a preference there. We'll be somewhat rigid. And the hallmark, as I see it, of any deeper state of spiritual maturity is usually their own insight and experience of being isn't rigid. It's not fixed. It can kind of spontaneously conform or embody a particular moment. And to me, that's my version of the middle way. It's not so much a middle way, a sort of sacred compromise between opposites. It's the ability to move seamlessly within the world of opposites.